So today I'm delighted to welcome Ross Singleton to the show. Ross has an incredible career, predominantly in telecoms and angel investing, with over 30 years spent in the field. She's worked her way up from project manager, program manager, to head of strategy, to COO at Relish Networks, and to the managing director of broadband at 3. And now she chairs the UK 5G advisory board, as well as doing all of her angel investments. Ross, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Tom. Nice of you to have me.
Now, I know we are going to delve into angel investing at length, but I wanted to start and ask kind of what have been your career highlights?
One of my first jobs, actually, I was a tea lady, like Mrs. Doyle, pushing a tea trolley around with buns on it and those sorts of things. And I think, jobs like that, and I was talking to somebody the other day about this, and things like being a bartender, they teach you a lot about actually how you make people happy and how you listen to people and how important listening to people actually is in most jobs. And so in a weird way, that was a highlight. And I've sort of worked my way through a variety of jobs as somebody relatively unqualified. I started work when I was full-time when I was just about 18. One of the things I will say that I learned all the way through is that actually leadership is so important in how you experience a company and how much you enjoy working there. You generally need to feel like you're doing something useful and you're following somebody who is doing something for good reasons and knows what they're doing and has a direction. Rather than, at least for me, I've never really wanted to sit there and feel like I'm turning the handle on a day-to-day basis.
So one quick question though on that, your role in UK 5G, you're chairing this advisory committee. It's obviously a hot topic. I would love to learn a bit more about kind of what you're actually doing.
UK 5G was set up by the government in 2018 to help foster the ecosystem around 5G in the UK. So the UK didn't do very well with 4G. We were much slower rolling it out commercially, and we never really understood the potential of it, I think, in the same way other nations did, who are still, if you look at Korea, Japan, China, the way they use data, the way they use apps, the way they use systems is still miles ahead of where we are. Just from the sheer volume, actually, of the data they consume in Hong Kong is probably 10 times a monthly basis what we do. So the UK government decided what would be a really good idea with 5G is to fund a program about information and moving the agenda forwards, if you like, which includes our test beds and trials program. And that is administered by a group called UK 5G, of which I chair the advisory board. So the idea is that we try and do things with 5G that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So it's not about the, consumer sitting on the bus being able to, VR Fruit Ninja or whatever it is. It is much more about industrial applications. So things like, for agri-tech, which is really interesting, or aquaculture, or social care, medical care, all those sorts of things. We've had lots and lots of different test bed and trials, ones that are about urban environments, ones that are about rural environments, and ones that are about, proving use cases. And in the last year and a half or so, we've set up these working groups, and I love the working groups. I'm really proud of them because actually they work with a much wider group of people all across the country in various industries. So, for example, we have one for the creative industries, which covers, TV, gaming, marketing, all sorts of things. One that covers local authorities, one that covers manufacturing, and many more, including security and international activity. And they actually reach out into those communities, gather information, bring it back, engage people in those communities. So it's much broader than the advisory group. And what that means is we actually have people in local authorities, in local enterprise partnerships, in small businesses who understand what we're doing and can support and evangelize that.
It sounds fantastic. And it sounds very much like you've got almost a startup approach to that, where you're constantly surveying the various end users, those being the different industries that might benefit from the rollout of it.
I think it's really important in the sense of, as well, getting the information out to as many people as possible. We're spending public money on these trials to prove things and to provide better information and evidence for, industry to be able to create business cases and people to get inspired to put various, chunks of ideas together to create other things, and to prove that there is profitability or certainly a viable business case for local authorities or for businesses to be able to roll out solutions around 5G.
I mean, you've clearly had a fantastic career and obviously are heavily involved in what's going on. How then did you make your transition into angel investing, and how do you find the time
I suppose in about 2014 or 15, I was at a Women in Telecoms and Technology event, which is actually chaired by one of my colleagues at Angel Academy, the angel investing group I'm a member of. And Sarah Turner, who is the CEO of Angel Academy, this angel investing group I'm part of, was speaking there. And it was really great to see her, and one of the portfolio company CEOs was speaking as well, because I'd always thought of angel investing as being, guys who invest in Mark Zuckerberg, or, wearing blue suits, marching around the city, carrying folios, and, largely being rude and shouting about spreadsheets a lot, that whole thing. And I thought it was something for mega rich people. So I'm very fortunate. I've been quite successful, but I'm certainly not mega rich. So to actually see Sarah, who seemed relatively normal, talk about this, she made it very accessible and easy to understand, and not like you needed to know everything about business to be able to run it. And all those things are the sorts of barriers that if you had considered it before, and to be honest, I hadn't even considered it before because it always sounded like this fantastical sort of American type thing, then it just made it plausible. So I got in touch with Sarah and went to a pitch event, and it was just really brilliant, interesting and fun. And I met lots of people I wouldn't have met otherwise. And I saw some great companies pitch, with these amazing founders who just have so much energy and extraordinary ideas and a passion for what they do. And I've actually found it's been brilliant because I've learned so much about so many different things. I mean, you see, I'm quite involved in the businesses genuinely compared to some investors. I'm not, but I'll absolutely support them if they ask me for help where my skill set's useful, which, often it's not the primary skill set they're looking for, as I'm not a marketing person. But I really, really enjoy watching the businesses, learning from them, learning from the entrepreneurs, and providing help when I can to them as well.
So you got involved back in 2014, 2015 time.
Yeah.
How long did it take before you actually made your first investment?
No, I think my first ever investment was at the first pitch meeting I went to. It did take a few months to close, but I was again massively impressed with the founder, who was a scientist who had converted over to data science and was providing, a route for other people to do the same. And again, this sort of, a space scientist. So I'm a bit of a nerd. So I'm like, oh, science, because I left school fairly early, and I don't know that much about those sorts of things other than what I've read since. And it was great. And the whole thing is, it is really an interesting insight into different industries and industries that are coming along. So Angel Academy is, I should point out, a primarily female investment group. So we are our diversity target is about 30% men. So we try and make sure we balance things up that way. But essentially, we are set up to encourage investing by women as angels into other businesses which have at least one female founder. So the idea is we're out there really to encourage more investment from women, because women actually have a lot of the purse strings, but tend not to be directed towards actually higher risk investments. And obviously, we can all see lots of evidence for, why this isn't such a good situation for anyone, and why it's probably not the smartest thing to do in terms of success either. So yeah, we invest in diverse startup teams, and we try and make sure we are as a diverse set of investors as well. Very few of the companies we are invested in, I would say, are ones that you would consider traditionally female or aimed primarily at a female market.
And I won't share your full portfolio, but there is definitely a diversity among industries that the companies that you've backed span. So coming to that, though, oftentimes what you hear about angel investing is that you should stick to things that you know. And if I had to pigeonhole you, I would say you should only invest in telecom stuff because you've got this career in telecoms. But you've definitely broken that mold. You've got a great background in telecoms and technology. But if we look at just two companies in your portfolio, just to show the span of what you've done, one of them is actually one of our portfolio companies, which is called Nix and Kicks, who make fantastic beverages. If you've traveled, well, I would say by train in the last 12 months, but before lockdown, you've probably seen them at most of the stations. They stock them in nice places. So talk me through, how do you approach something like Nix and Kicks, where it's a fast moving consumer good? It's not something that you've necessarily dealt with directly. How do you conduct due diligence on that, and what is it that you're looking for?
Well, I'm very lucky actually. With Angel Academy, we do due diligence in groups. Obviously, we're still all responsible for our own decisions, but we have a process with due diligence. We actually have a written down process, which I really appreciate. It speaks to my background. So my background is actually largely in IT and telecoms. So technology is not a million miles away.
True.
I understand software and those sorts of things to a greater or lesser extent. But yeah, soft drinks was a bit of a break for me from that. I would say, you go about due diligence by working with your colleagues actually in the Angel Investing Group, because quite a few of them know a lot about FMCG. We have people who have been very senior in a variety of very serious FMCG companies. And at the end of the day, there's a set of accounts and projections and there's a founding team. And I think what we all know with angel investing is almost, it doesn't matter how great the product is, it's always going to be about product market fit, timing, and that little bit of fairy dust that just makes the luck work, and having the right founders and the right team to either make the luck or take advantage of it when it happens, right? And those are the things that I think actually make a difference. And if I look at the founding team of Nix and Kicks, I mean, Kirsten and Julia are amazing. They are energetic. They really care about their people. They taught themselves how to do this. And I have to say, as somebody who's not a massive fan of soft drinks as a general rule, I really like them. They're really good. It's really nice to actually have a soft drink that doesn't make my teeth feel like it's going to fall out. And that was the other thing is, I actually like the product. And, it's vegan, it's alcohol free, it's low sugar. The cayenne kick in it, I love as well, because it does cook you up a bit, it's like ginger in something. It's great.
No, fantastic. At the other end of the spectrum, you mentioned earlier, you're a bit of a nerd. You invested in Provenance, which develops blockchain technology for businesses to track items through supply chains, which again, completely fascinating, but FMCG and then blockchain, on this side. I suppose some of it is the same because you highlighted that you have a process for due diligence, but how do you change, if at all, the approach to that type of business versus a Nix and Kicks? Or, is there anything different you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, again, what I would say is in both of them, what I look for is strength of the founders, structure to a greater or lesser extent, and depending on the system, how do you produce what you do? How do you make sure what you do works? How do you make sure your customers are happy? Those sorts of things. So I'm quite process oriented, and it's about understanding what you need to focus on in terms of what are the key things that, as a leader of a business, that you need to focus on to deliver what you need to deliver to your customers, which, let's face it, are who pay you and who will help your business grow. And it's absolutely about that sort of laser focus on doing that and sorting out the key issues with your business. So whether it's, in the case of the Nix and Kicks team, they have really robust, well-rehearsed Brexit plans. If we talk about Provenance, I love Provenance. They're really interesting. They're incredibly purpose-driven. They've got over quite a lot of lumps and bumps over the way where, it's just this stuff is hard to be able to work with everything from texting technology through to proper barcode scanning technology and all these things to actually make sure you can track something. So a tin of tuna, for example, you can follow a tin of kelp tuna with Provenance all the way back to where it came out of the ocean and the person that fished it out. So where something came from. And, clearly you can see so many applications for that, whether it's on auction sites for, let's say, secondhand handbags or designer clothes, to actually where your food comes from, to signing of documents or the evolution of documents like deeds, and the blockchain's like the headline that's fancy, but actually that isn't the key. They understand, and Jessie, the CEO, understands very much that blockchain is a tool that helps this stuff happen. She's very purpose driven. They're a B corporation, and again has that very smart, structured approach, meets targets, understands, when she says she'll do something, that she's committing to it, and so do her team. Really good leader, well thought of in the industry. All these things that are actually, I suppose, common in between a lot of the I suppose, more successful businesses that I've been behind, and the ones that over time, you realize you can continue to be really enthusiastic about, are about that consistency of purpose and the consistency of focus on delivery, not just for your customers actually, but also for your teams inside. I mean, both companies through lockdown have focused very strongly on making sure their teams are engaged and that their well-being is looked after.
Yeah, and I think with Nicks and Kicks, if I'm not mistaken, they managed to open up their online shop within like a couple of weeks of lockdown starting. It was one of those, you know what, we're just going to open an online shop. I'm sure it's going well because the last update was good. It was nice to see these companies that can adapt so quickly to the changing macro.
I may have a couple of cases of Nicks and Kicks stuff in my garage.
Fantastic. We looked a little bit at kind of what you look for. I want to talk about like red flags for a second. So let's assume that you had fantastic founder, fantastic project. Are there any things that you would say are less obvious red flags that kind of put you off a company?
Yeah, I mean, again, some of these come from experience. And some of these, what I'm finding with red flags is they're very personal. If we're saying in the circumstance where all the paperwork is great, so, the forecasts are good, the history is good and matches the forecast, the references we've taken from, existing investors or whatever are good, et cetera, all that stuff is fine. The plans make sense. The things that tend to make me go, you know what, this doesn't work for me are largely personal. So if I feel like the founders or the founding team aren't being truthful, I mean, everybody is on a sell, right? When you're raising money for your business, you're on a sell. Everybody knows that's fine. I accept that. But it's that, there's always a sort of line where you think, well, that goes over my personal moral line for what they're going to exaggerate about those sorts of things. Or if, for example, I feel like the founding team aren't open to suggestions. And again, it's not that I expect them to listen to me necessarily, but we have lots of experienced angels. And if I feel like they're not considering ideas or, thinking about how they might do things and I'll just basically, set in that mindset of, no, we're doing it this way, then that gives me pause and I think stores up problems for the future. I've probably missed out on a lot of things where I will kick myself down the road, but those things particularly for me do seem to be red flags. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned kind of learning from experience. Are there any war stories you're willing to share? Not naming and shaming the companies, but just a situation where you overlooked something and it didn't work out.
One of my little foibles when I invest is, if you like, is I don't really like investing in family members working together, partly from experience of like actual day-to-day work and partly from an investment experience where you realize that a CEO is perhaps a little autocratic, again, which is not necessarily bad in itself, but it's that whole thing where, they're very much, we are going this way and we're doing that. And then they bring in a spouse or, the spouse also works with them. And that just means that quite a lot of the business, at least in my head, is conducted away from the office, again, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it's a whole thing where it's very hard to take people with you if you're evolving all the time when you're not physically around those people and your ideas evolve over a weekend or overnight, you have an epiphany, but nobody else has seen that. And it's very hard to move that along, from personal experience as well at work. I've seen how difficult it and exclusionary it can be for the rest of the team. So that sort of thing, I would say from experience, definitely doesn't seem to work in terms of building a business.
With the way COVID has gone so far and so many teams being virtual and possibly remaining virtual for the foreseeable future, how do you think the teams have adapted to that? And how has that changed your view of not working in the same space?
Whether you're in a virtual space or an office space, I'm not sure it makes that much difference. I suppose it's about that partnership thing, right? Who is your primary team at work? And I'm not saying these things don't work. Lots of people don't mind married couples or whatever. It's just, for me, it's that primary team thing. I would say that the companies I've worked with, largely, I've been so proud of how they've managed to cope, both with cash flow issues, with pivoting, like you say, Nicks and Kicks, moving to their online store, with actually how they support their teams, how they are trying to make sure they create a team atmosphere, even if it's just getting together, with everybody masked once every blue moon, or doing sports activities outside, walking, those sorts of things. They've largely managed, I think, to keep themselves together and cope through what's been very difficult, because clearly they've also had to furlough people and occasionally make people redundant. These are all really hard decisions for CEOs who previously quite often will have been on primarily a growth trajectory. And it's nothing to do with how well they're running their business. I mean, that's got to be really hard, but to be resilient enough to come out and still be in business, and, they all are still in businesses, I think is absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic. Two last questions. So first, what do you see coming next year in terms of trends and kind of what's exciting you in the angel space?
Oh, that's always a very interesting question. I think medtech is going to continue to grow and grow. particularly, I think, what we are seeing is some companies come up around fertility management and those sorts of things and remote management of that. And you can see there are some areas of medicine where particularly, a lot of stuff is done face to face where it really doesn't need to be done face to face or over the phone. And, if you look at what NHSX is doing and NHS Digital, again, they're trying to surmount lots of these issues. And you can see that there is space for private solutions in the medical sector. But I think one of the other things that is going to become increasingly important is place. So where you are, and ideas that make the most of where you are at a point in time, where you live, where you're from, how your built environment works around you. And I feel like that's going to come into its own a little bit, partly because people are, where we're lucky enough to be able to, working remotely, because networks are going to be built out all over the country, certainly over the next few years. And also just because I think people are reappreciating their local environments a little bit more than we used to. I mean, like now I sit here, I don't know how I fitted in 4 hours commuting a day. I don't remember how I did that because I'm busy all the time. How on earth, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people feel the same way. So again, that sense of place I can see becoming, really actually quite vital, and how you enliven communities and make sure there's an awareness of what's going on and those sorts of things. I think there's a lot to be said for what will happen around that in the next 2 years.
So last question, you kind of touched a little bit on a lesson learned from the war story, but with the benefit of hindsight, what do you think was one of the key things you would have liked to have known when you started out angel investing that you would tell yourself if you could go back in time? And let's come up with something different than the don't invest in couples.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. So the thing actually I would have told myself is that my input is useful. So the thing is, when you start with anything new, for most people, and it was certainly very true of me, I lack confidence in thinking that I understood enough, or I could read a cash flow forecast or a balance sheet or those sorts of things. I mean, obviously I can do that, I've run businesses, but, feeling like when I looked at something or when I read the terms, I would actually be able to say anything useful. And the thing I've learned from it has actually given me quite a big boost actually in lots of other areas as well, is that you can understand a lot of this stuff. And the questions you might ask are largely not stupid. There's very few things that are close to being a stupid question. And actually the contribution that people make, whether it's me or somebody else who's new to angel investing, they shouldn't feel quite so recalcitrant about, because actually, it's useful. Somebody else may not have thought about it. And so I think that's the thing is, you need to have a little bit more courage of your knowledge, experience and convictions, because that's at the end of the day, angel investing is largely you investing those, knowledge and experience points, if you like, in to a degree into assessing a business.
Fantastic advice. Definitely worthy of ending the show. Although I will make one last plug for Nicks and Kicks, of course, because they are a portfolio company, and actually they are a fantastic beverage. But also I wanted to re-highlight the fantastic work that you're doing with UK 5G, as well as with Angel Academy. We are members of Angel Academy as well. It is a great organization and has fantastic companies going through it, as the data will tell you. So thank you ever so much for agreeing to be grilled by me. Hopefully it wasn't too bad of an experience. And maybe we'll revisit this conversation in 6 to 12 months' time and see how the environment has changed for angel investing then. So have a great rest of your day, Ross.
Great. Thanks very much, Tom.
Cheers.